Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I miss you guys. I'm kind of falling into a routine here. My head's cut off. Um, so it's looking like I'm recording two videos a night and trying to post them up at night. You should be able to wake up to these videos in the morning time. So what's going to happen from now on is that I'm taking attendance by issuing questions. They're assigned to each one of these videos, and I want you to turn them in by 11:59 p.m. So I want them by midnight. I'll grade them the next day, and that's how I take attendance, I guess. So it's not the best system, but it's what we got. It's what we're working with here. So we have to make do. There's a lot of adjustments. I bought a new microphone, by the way. I'm turning into kind of a podcasting studio here. I probably need a new webcam at some point. Probably need a new light because like my eye sockets look like they're pits, black holes. And then you see the reflection of my glasses. So I'm gonna have to figure out something, guys. I'm doing what I can. Um, I hope that these videos give us some sense of constancy, some sense of I don't know if constancy is even a word. Consistency is probably a better word. Consistency, some sense of normalcy. There's a lesson, a story I remember hearing from a guy that went to prison, and he got into a fight or something, ended up in solitary confinement. So he's isolated from his friends in prison, but he's in his own cell. But even then, when they'd wake up in the morning, he would hear these different guys in uh, prison, these isolated cells, and they have morning roll call where they'd yell out through the door to the other people in the cells around them, um, yell their names, Diaz, and you say here, and Gonzalez here, and what would happen is that they'd all get up, they're all in their cells, they're separate, but everybody you call out roll call, right? And they do what's called programming. Let's get after it. Let's start putting in work. So they do their burpees together. They do their push-ups together. They do the pull-ups together. They're all in their own cell. But the idea is that no one gets left behind. Everyone's accountable. Doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter your consistence. You're not consistent. But it doesn't matter where your environment. If you're alone, you're going to get after it with your buddies because we need purpose. Okay, we don't fall apart just because you're alone in a cell. And I think you guys could probably see the synthesis going on here. Look, you guys are at home. I can't monitor you the way that I used to, but these videos are your morning roll call, right? Let's get after it. It's incumbent upon you to continue education. I can't stay on top of you the way that I used to, and I can't certainly can't enforce any sense of hands-on discipline. It's got to be both of us making this commitment together. Look, I'm going to keep filming these videos because I need a purpose. My purpose is to educate you guys. I wish I was there with you, but I can't be. Meet me halfway on this. Let's get after it. What's going on with the AP test? I don't know. I've seen different things. I'm in this, strangely enough, this Corona chat with Natalie later, and Elliot, a few of the other students, Alicia, and I think one of them posted this picture that AP test will be just multiple choice and will be administered at home. If that's true, you guys are well prepared for the multiple choice. It's something that, if there's one thing that I think I'm pretty good at, it's preparing kids for the multiple choice. You've been given a lot of information. I don't know if it sticks. But usually my students traditionally do pretty well in the multiple choice. The article they took a screenshot of also said that colleges are prepared to accept that. I don't know how reliable this information is, but if it is multiple choice, you guys should be able to crush it. The idea is that you'd be able to take it at home. I don't know how they're going to do that. I don't know. It's a weird time. It's a weird situation, but we still got to get after it. We all do. Look, my gym is closed. All gyms are closed. We can't work out together anymore. Well, not you and I, but as a society, we can't hit the gym together. So I got to find alternatives. I'm doing bar work. I'm doing push-ups. I'm doing what I can because I won't fall apart. Okay. And there's something, I don't know how much you can fight a virus, right? We can't punch it. I guess we can lock ourselves in our house like we're doing. Um, but I'm not going to deteriorate, not physically, not mentally. I have a commitment to you guys. Um, I'm going to meet you every morning with a video. It's my way of trying to provide some sense of consistency, some sense of normalcy, some sense of, here we are, community. Community. Speaking of community, by the way, I'm also thinking about doing setting up a Minecraft server, Overwatch tournaments. I don't know. Um, I have time in my hands where we can play, but it's there's so many things. Believe it or not, I'm actually working more now than I did when we were in, sharing a classroom together, producing videos and rewriting. I don't know if you guys noticed, but well, I think I've already addressed this in a previous video, but I'm rewriting the curriculum as we speak to be more in line with College Board. All that's taken more time than I thought. And now I have to grade these questions every day to input attendance. So I don't know how much time I'm going to have to play. I want to. Um, I want it to be fun to be able to have some online community. I think we addressed this at one point in class. We were talking about, do you have to see people to be close to them? And I don't believe you do. I believe that setting up a Minecraft server or playing some Overwatch together, doing something together, there's still that sense of community together. And if you guys don't play, you're welcome to. Somebody will probably stream it on Twitch. I don't know, who. I'm not really that eager to set up a Twitch account. I don't even have a webcam. I mean, I have this on my laptop. I don't have one on my computer. So, and I don't know if I want to go out and go the route of a webcam. Maybe that's my next step. Because basically, I'm becoming a professional podcaster, or a YouTuber, or something like that, at this point. So, anyways, that's what's going on. So, let's get into the topic today. So, yeah, this is your morning roll call, guys. This is let's put in some work today. Yeah. Some of you guys that might have had trouble motivating yourself during the school year when we were sharing a classroom together, you're gonna have to find it within yourselves now, man. Who are you? You're gonna fall apart. You're going to, kick back and just and drift, aimlessly. I can't relate to that if that's what's going on, because I need purpose. I enjoy having this to do, um, to educate you. I enjoy having this bond with you. And so I hope some of the less motivated of you, and in general, my EP kids are pretty well motivated. Most of you guys really are. If you're having that crisis of motivation, look, I haven't forgotten you. Okay. I'm already, I could picture some of your faces right now who I wish I could be looking at right now in a classroom. Look, I haven't forgotten you. Okay. I hope you haven't forgotten you either. So, anyways, let's get into it. Topic 7.13. I should have addressed this yesterday. I did not. I skipped one. I don't know how I did that, but I was like halfway in. I realized I skipped it. So I have this video that was, I don't know, 20 minutes long. I'm like, well, I might as well finish it now. So here we are. Well, the 7.13 will be waiting for you tomorrow when you wake up. I'll post it tonight for those of you that are late birds. But it's World War II, the military. Most kids are kind of disappointed because we don't really talk a lot about the battles. I mean, I do in regular more than we do in AP. There's some things specifically they want you to know in AP that are not the same as the military. Or sorry, that's not something in regular. I'm looking at this picture in back of me and I'm thinking, man, I really got to put something there. Yeah, I need to build like a podcast studio or something, or a YouTube studio. So, anyways, yeah, so we cover the battles a lot more in regular, modern American history. Uh, anyways, but yeah, so here we go. Let's get into the big picture. What are we looking at here? It's going to say, World War II military, but the reality is it's not that specific about the military. It's really not. Let me zoom the screen in here and see what's going on here. So am I still, let's see. Did I just lose that? Did I lose you guys? Oh, that was a bad idea. Oh, shit. No, I think I'm still recording. I am. Okay. So sorry about swearing, guys. I apologize. And I don't want to stop it now because I just recorded like 20 minutes or whatever it was. All right. So the thematic focus, what we're looking at here is America and the world. I'm still learning the software, so please be patient with me. Let's see. The gist of it is, I could read this to you, but the gist of it is that, look, the United States, and I've made this argument with you before, World War II is going to be a defining event for the United States. We are going to emerge in the most powerful nation on the planet. When I say powerful, you got to be careful because I don't just mean military power. If you're talking military power, at least on land, with tanks and artillery and like soldiers and stuff like that. Look, the Soviet army is gigantic. It's worth remembering that because it's going to be important during the Cold War. The Soviet military is absolutely formidable. Okay, it's formidable. It's and just a straight battle between armies, they probably would beat us all the way. At some points, it would easily beat us, and at some points, it would be close. That will change with Ronald Reagan. Okay, Ronald Reagan later in the 1980s is going to begin this military buildup, which will end the Cold War. But guys, it's worth remembering at this point that we cannot beat the Soviet army in a head-on fight with tanks and trying to meet them tank for tank. First of all, they have like 4 times as many tanks as we do. It's a weird thing because they survived the war with crippling losses. I mean, they lose tremendous amounts of people. Yet they build this army that is, well, like I said, formidable. But America is the most powerful nation on the planet. If it's not because we have tanks and artillery, then what is it? Well, it's because America has things that the Soviet Union doesn't. It has a thriving economy. We emerged from a World War II wealthier with more trade opportunities. So it's there's a lot to that. There I am. Now I can see myself again. Yeah, I don't like this the option I chose to record, but there's a lot of you have to define how you measure power. It's not going to be just military power that makes the United States. I mean, we do have military power, but it's not so much in our land forces. America's Air Force is second to none. We also have the atomic bomb. We have a monopoly in the atomic bomb, meaning that we're the only country that has it. That's not going to last very long. But it's American. Well, there's guys. There's going to be economic strength. There's going to be trade opportunities. There's going to be industrial strength. America is unparalleled in those things. And there's one other source that is more difficult to put your finger on. It's cultural strength, cultural superiority. And this would be called American soft power. The idea of soft power being that America's just cooler. And that's a weird thing to say because what do you mean? What do you mean by cooler? I mean, America is well regarded in the world. People want to listen to American and popular culture, American popular culture infiltrates the world. And we didn't understand how true this was until after the Cold War was over, how deeply American popular culture had seeped into the communist countries. People wanted to buy American cigarettes. People wanted to listen to American music. People wanted to, buy American jeans. People wanted to escape to America. America was seen as this island where you can escape to and start a new life with unlimited possibilities if you're a communist. So, I remember just to kind of put this in perspective. I remember when I had to get my car fixed, and the guy fixing my car, I was talking to him, and he said, he was from, I think it was Romania. It was one of these communist countries during the Cold War. And I asked him, so what was it like during the Cold War? He says, I always dreamed of going to the United States. So we used to get this gum. I guess he had cousins that would bring him over gum, bazooka gum. I don't know if you guys have had bazooka. I can't imagine you bought it. It's kind of thing you usually get like Halloween or something, like your bags. But anyways, he'd get bazooka gum. And what he would do is he would cut it into like 4 pieces. The bazooka would come in like little chunks like that, and he'd cut it into like 4 pieces, and he would share that with with well, he wouldn't share it. He'd sell it to his classmates. He'd sell it for like 5 cents a chunk or whatever, and he'd sell it as American gum. Would you like to buy American gum? And guys, he would sell out. He would sell out. I mean, he couldn't keep. He couldn't. It was gone within seconds because people wanted to buy American chewing gum. By the way, Bazooka gum sucks, man. You guys have to try Bazooka gum. That stuff is like you're waging war with your jaws trying to eat Bazooka gum. But anyways, he'd keep the comics because Bazooka came with little comic strips. He'd keep the comic strips for himself because I don't think he could even read English. I don't know if you guys have read those Bazooka comic strips, but they're not funny. I mean, I've never laughed out loud from any of them. I don't remember thinking any of them were even humorous. But he saved all of them. He saved all of them, and he put them in a shoebox. And I don't think he could even read English. But he said he kept it in that shoebox because that reminded him of America. He had America in a little shoebox. And that was consoling to him. That was invigorating to him. That was something to aspire to. That was promise of opportunity to him. So I heard that story and I was like, wow, that's American soft power. That's the power of America. That's something that the Soviet Union can't project. It's cultural weapon. Okay, but anyways, yeah, so there are lots of different reasons why America is going to be a superpower. You can't just measure it by tanks. But we'll talk more about that later. I'll talk more about American soft power. This won't be the last time. So, guys, World War II, America is going to be the most powerful nation on the planet. It may not be militarily because the Soviet Union, especially in a land battle in Europe, will probably beat us. But if you add up all the factors of power, wealth, societal, satisfaction and happiness, if you talk about cultural power, if you talk about, the ability to project influence into the planet without having to kill people necessarily, America is head and shoulders above the Soviet Union. You talk about industrial might, you talk about ability to generate wealth. That's America. Guys, World War II is a defining moment in American history for a number of reasons. We are the most powerful nation on the planet, and the days of isolationism are behind us. For better or for worse. And that was actually one of your questions, I think, from yesterday. For better or for worse. Okay. So anyways, let's get into it. So what's your learning objective? Explain the cause and effects of the victory of the United States and its allies over the Axis powers. Well, what are the causes? They want you to know about the wartime cooperation. It's true. We'll talk more about that. So there is cooperation on a couple of issues, a couple of fronts with our allies. We cooperate, especially the British and Americans. We cooperate with technology. There's some examples of that we'll talk about. But for sure, all three of us, being Britain, the Soviet Union, the United States, we cooperate on strategy. Okay. So College Board wants you to emphasize those. I'm not sure if I agree with the rankings of all these. They're not really put in any particular order, but I'm not sure I agree with what they place as the emphasis. But whatever, it doesn't matter what I think. That's what they want you to know. Okay. Another thing to know is that the United States has massive advantages in all kinds of production. And if you're going to add in manpower with the Soviet Union, the amount of population that the United States and particularly the Soviet Union, and then you want to add China to the mix too, the Axis are overwhelmed by this avalanche of materials. They're overwhelmed by this avalanche of people, of soldiers. Guys, the Red Army from the Soviet Union breaks the back of the German army and pushes them all the way back to Berlin, despite suffering horrendous losses, horrendous losses. We just, the reality is, it's not a fair fight. We, if you really want to be kind of objective looking at it, it's surprising how well Germany especially did, given the military situation confronting them. Okay, it's amazing what they were able to accomplish, given the disadvantage of production, of manpower, of GDP, of just so many different categories. So yes, the Allies have it's not a fair fight. Okay, the Allies have huge advantages in food production, population, military age males, trade, everything. Okay, and you're also going to see that there is, and actually I don't talk much about this in the notes except for here, there is going to be serious resistance. There's going to be people that are fighting tooth and nails, guys. And let me explain why I'm bringing this up. The early days of World War II is largely, except for some situations like the Italians in Ethiopia, where they actually experienced some stiff resistance, it's going to be something of a cakewalk for the Germans and the Japanese. They're going to invade. The Japanese are going to invade China, Manchuria, the Korean Peninsula, and they're pretty much going to be able to advance almost at will. I mean, that's oversimplifying it, but they're able to grab and seize objectives that they want. There's going to be a lot of Chinese resistance against the Japanese, and that'll always be there during the war. It's going to kind of what we call tar pit them. It's going to stick the Japanese, like a lot of Japanese soldiers in China. But the reality is that the Japanese army is able to seize the objectives it wants for the most part. The German army is going to blitz through Poland. They're going to blitz through France. It looks like, guys, when they open the invasion of the Soviet Union, they're going to blitz into the Soviet Union too. It looks like the Nazi war machine is unstoppable until the Battle of Britain. Okay, they want to invade Britain, but to do that, you have to control the skies. Okay, because you cannot. I wish it was easier to switch between tabs. I'll have to figure out all this stuff as I go. But if I could show you a map, guys, remember Britain's an island. So it's just off of France. So you have the English Channel there. To invade Britain, you got to put soldiers on boats. You have to put tanks on ships to invade Britain. Well, if you do that and you don't control the skies and you try to sail those soldiers and tanks across the ocean, they will be annihilated. Okay, British bombers will swoop down from the skies and they will start putting bombs and torpedoes into those ships, and you'll have a bunch of dead German soldiers and Nazi tanks at the bottom of the English Channel. So it's a battle for supremacy of the skies. They call that air supremacy. If you can't control the skies, you can't invade Britain. So guys, the Battle of Britain turns into this titanic battle to see who's going to control the skies. And Britain, this is their darkest hour. It's their darkest hour. It's, and guys, Churchill makes it clear. If ever there was a wartime leader, Churchill might have been one of them. But he makes it clear. He gives a speech, we will fight them on the landing beaches, and I wish I remembered it verbatim. We will fight them in the air. We will fight them on the sea. We will fight them in the landing beaches. The idea is that, guys, look, France just collapsed. Okay, the British Army just faced this disastrous retreat at Dunkirk. I don't know if you guys seen the movie, but I've never seen it. I don't know if they tried to portray that as a victory. You want to know what Dunkirk was? It was a British army and some of our allies, and some of Britain's allies, because they're not our allies at that moment, because we're not in the war. They're fleeing Europe because they lost. Nazi tanks are sweeping through Europe. And the British are trying to get their army out of there and as much of their allies as they can. And the only reason they're able to do it, by the way, is that the British Air Force is putting in work. The British Air Force holds the skies. And there is this moment after France falls where the question is, will Britain fall? Will they surrender? They're alone, guys. They're alone against the Nazi Empire. Right? America's not jumping in. In fact, America's made it clear, with the Neutrality Acts, we want no part of this. Adjusting my mic here. Right? We want no part of this. We won't help a nation at war. Right? We won't lend money. We won't sell weapons. Guys, Britain's alone. But it's at this moment where we start considering, wow, should we jump in? This is when we start talking about the cash and carry policy. Because the question is, guys, we don't know if Britain's going to make it. There are a lot of people that think Britain's going to collapse. And Churchill definitively states his view on this. We're not going anywhere. Right? This fight's not over. That was just round one. That's not the fight. That's round one. Right? Next round's coming. We're coming out. We're swinging. Right? And this turns into this huge air battle over Britain, where, Nazi bombers are trying to pummel the British Air Force. And it really turns into this. The question really becomes this. Can the British Air Force survive? Can they stay in the skies? Can they put up a fight? Can they contest Nazi control of the skies? Because the second the Germans control the skies, you're looking at an invasion of Britain. Okay. The second that Germany can sweep the British Air Force from the skies and face no opposition is the second you will see German warships cross the channel with troop transports and landing ships for tanks. And you will see the German army landed on British shores. And Churchill and the British people, to their credit, like I said, Churchill calls this as Britain's darkest hours. They are alone against the might of the Nazi Empire. And they won't quit. You have British, I think I told you this the other day, but you have British children sleeping in the subway while German bombers are firebombing London. London is burning. And it's not the only city. You have German school children that are going to school, and they'd go out during lunch and you could see the German Air Force and the British Air Force fighting in the skies. British pilots are going up to shoot down Nazi bombers, and you could see the trails crisscrossing the sky as they're trying to kill each other. And you'd see planes fall like comets from the sky and pilots bailing out. And British pilots are exhausted because they're going up 2, 3, 4, 5 times a day. Planes are easier to replace than pilots. Pilots take a long time to train. You can't just throw some guy into a plane and say like, hey, all right, let's go. It takes years to become a decent pilot. And these guys are exhausted. They're exhausted, but they keep going up. And the British people they're still in the fight. Right? They're still in the fight. And I think this is probably a good point to notice this, guys. We're in extraordinary circumstances now. I can't see you. We're separate from one another. Are you still in the fight? I am. You still in the fight? Guys, this isn't that bad, man. I mean, our homes aren't burning around us. I'm not burying my dead that have been killed, like family members that have been killed by Nazi bombs. People have survived worse than this, far worse than this. Okay. Weekend 2. He says, we could take worse than this. I'm glad I could be here with you, So anyways, so that's, you're looking at this, the Germans start bumping into serious resistance at the Battle of Britain, guys. Stalingrad, and this is the interesting thing about Britain, guys. Hitler wants to invade Stalingrad. Well, not Stalingrad specifically, but the Soviet Union. And he wants to get this done before winter sets in. So all this time he's not fooling around, but all this time spent with Britain is time taken away from the invasion of the Soviet Union. He wants to jump in quick before winter hits, because winter in the Soviet Union is a whole different ballgame. And this is going to be where he makes a fateful decision, because he's going to turn his back on a Britain that has not surrendered, on a Britain that's still in the fight. And now he's fighting on 2 fronts. He's fighting with the British in the West, and then he launches this titanic invasion of the East, the Soviet Union, and that's where the war is going to be decided. He launches this titanic invasion of the East, and he starts rampaging through the Soviet Union with his tanks until Stalingrad, until Leningrad. The Soviets are going to buckle. The Soviets are going to collapse. The Soviets will rally. The Soviets will dig in. The Soviets will fight. And when I mean fight, they will fight until the earth is on fire underneath their feet. In Stalingrad, you have people fighting door to door, from basements, from cellars, from rooftops. You have times where Nazi soldiers and Soviet soldiers are in the same building. There are mere walls separating each other, and they're punching holes in these walls with machine gun fire and throwing grenades through the walls at each other. These holes, like hand-to-hand fighting. It is the fighting at Stalingrad is savage. The fighting between the Soviet Union and the Third Reich, the Nazi war machine, is savage. There was very little mercy extended. It's understood that if the enemy gets their hands on you, your odds of survival are small. There's very little mercy asked, and there's very little mercy extended. And the other place where you'll see that, by the way, in this war is between the Americans and the Japanese. Okay, I wonder if I have that picture of Iwo Jima I meant to put in here. Let me see. Yeah, I do. The other place you'll see that is Iwo Jima. Here, where you get this picture, guys, of fighting between the Japanese and the United States is going to be savage. So when same situation for a number of different reasons, but you're going to see that the Allies, it's not just the numerical advantages they have. They're going to be able to use those numerical advantages to good effect and fight on top of it. If your armies were collapsing, yet you had this huge advantage in materials and equipment, supplies, food, it wouldn't matter if your soldiers aren't fighting. It wouldn't matter if your soldiers were collapsing, because you can't, those advantages mean nothing if your troops are surrendering everywhere. But the fact is that the Allies find their backbone. Okay, they dig in their heels and they start putting in work. Okay, so let's get into a little more detail. I don't know if I'm going to talk about the fighting. I probably already spoke too much about that. I don't want this video to be an hour and a half. I kind of feel that it's already going to be long. But let's get into some more of the detailed notes. Let's talk about some of the cooperation. So first off, we're going to talk about how this war was depicted. Okay, this war was depicted as a struggle for freedom and democracy against fascism and totalitarianism. Although that's weird because one of our allies is about as totalitarian as you can get. It complicates things. So Soviet Union complicates things. Being friends with friends, being friends with Stalin complicates issues. Okay, but America's going to pitch this as a war of against good. Sorry, war of good against evil. Um, and to be honest, the Axis make it very easy to do that. Okay, the Axis make it very easy to do that between the Holocaust and the death camps, and they weren't just killing Jews; they were killing gypsies, homosexuals, people that were physically infirm. They're going to be killing a lot of people. And the ones they weren't killing, guys, they weren't just death camps; they were also forced labor camps. So they would take Jews and basically work them to death. They would take populations in the countries that they conquered and force them to work in the Nazi war machine. You could read about Joseph Mengele and the stuff he did with the experimentation. So the Nazis, um, and guys, it's worse than you think because there are the French resistance where they would you know do what they could to damage the Nazi war machine, and when they started sabotaging trains or killing German officers, the Germans would take entire villages and start killing all the men in the village, or they'd shoot 100 people for every one German. You read these stories, and I mean, to be honest, I don't know how the Germans are supposed to deal with that, but that certainly doesn't win you any popularity points. And that's the Germans, guys. The Japanese are going to have some issues with this too. Let's go down and scroll into some of this stuff. At this point, we're down here to the what's going on. With some of these war crimes, I consider them war crimes. The German war crimes are more well documented, more. I don't know if they're well documented. I just think they're more well known. I wouldn't use the word popular, but people know about what happened with the Holocaust and the Jews and the Yellow Stars and the death camps. They know about that. You don't have to tell them about that. People that don't know much about history know that. It's less well known what the Japanese did. Okay, because what the Japanese did, well, I mean, guys, you have to start hearing what they were doing in China. You had what was called the Rape of Nanjing. And that's that city right there. I don't know if you guys can see my cursor, but the Rape of Nanjing, the Japanese faced resistance going into the city, and one of the few places where the Chinese army put up a, stiff resistance for the Chinese. You have to put that, I think it was like 2 or 3 days of fight or something like that, if I remember correctly. But eventually the Japanese army broke into Nanjing, and then they started beheading people. They started, bayoneting and killing all the men in the city, including boys. They have these beheading competitions with Japanese officers using katanas to see who could chop off the most heads. And the winner, the contest being published in Japanese newspapers. I used to show pictures of it. I don't do that anymore. But you'd see the river that flows through, and I don't remember the name of the river that flows through Nanjing, but it would be choked with bodies. So we have an issue with that. We don't kill civilians. Well, that's tough. We don't. Well, okay, that's going to be an issue. We don't kill them that way, but Americans will firebomb Japanese cities, and you will see civilians dying. The issue with civilians is a tough one. So, but certainly we don't. Guys, the Japanese army goes into Nanjing and starts raping systematically the city. You start hearing these horrifying accounts of thousands of women being raped by Japanese soldiers, and I've seen pictures of this stuff, which means that somebody's taking pictures of it, and it's a Japanese army that's doing that. You'll see Japanese soldiers taking pictures of their friends raping Chinese girls, and that's hard for them. That's one of the things that draws America not into the war. Well, I guess a couple hops away it will, but America is going to see that and be repulsed. and become sympathetic to the Chinese. Now, once we're actually in the war, there's going to be an event that demonstrates kind of the brutality of the Chinese. Sorry, the Japanese. Big difference. Don't get those confused. Don't get the two of them confused. You're going to get the Bataan Death March, and the Bataan Death March is going to be when some Americans surrender the Philippines, and their march to what's going to be a prisoner of war camp. I think it's like a 20-mile march. But look, these Americans that are captured, they surrender after this hellacious fight. They're out of ammunition. The Japanese basically decide to starve them out of their positions because a frontal attack would be too difficult. These guys are suffering from disease. You have men that used to weigh 180 pounds are down to maybe 110, 120. Most of them have diarrhea. They have one type of disease or another. Most of them they're starving. They've already eaten the horses. They've killed the rats they can get their hands on. You have men that had boiled belts and ate leather. There's nothing left. And they know that there's no hope of, being saved here. MacArthur's been evacuated. I'll tell you more about MacArthur later. And there's nothing left. There's no chance to win this. So they surrender. But now they're supposed to be marched 20 miles to a prisoner of war camp. Men that are skeletons or shadows of what they used to be. They're supposed to march 20 miles to this prisoner of war camp. And this is where the killing starts. You have American soldiers that can't walk. And to be fair, the Americans don't know what it's like to be captured by the Japanese. They don't know. And you have Americans that start seeing the brutal reality of it. If you can't walk, you will be killed. If you stumble, if you fall, you will be killed, and it will not be by a bullet. You will be bayoneted. You will be beheaded. It will be brutally physical killing. There won't be a bullet. And I remember hearing this story in all these places that were possible when I was taking a World War II class in college. And the professor was telling us, that the Bataan Death March was exaggerated, that the death counts weren't what traditional history said, that Americans viewed this under the lens of racism and exaggerated this. And one of the weird things about college is that you guys will discover that not all the students are 18 years old. Not all of them are 19 years old, not 20 years old. Some of these, we had people in this classroom that were older than the professor. And one of the students in our class was a gray-haired gentleman that was maybe sitting 2 rows down from my right. And I could see that he was upset. He was doing this with his head and throwing his hands up at times. And I'm like, whoa, this guy's gonna blow. This guy's gonna erupt here. And finally he does. And he gets up and he tells the professor, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what you're talking about. And you need to stop telling these lies to these kids. Said I was there. I was there. And I was with my friend, and he gave us the name of his friend. I don't remember it. And he said both of us had lost 60, 70 pounds. And we were weak. I could barely walk. And he couldn't walk at all. I had to carry him over my arms. Like I had to put his arm over my shoulder and carry him. And we started marching, and I didn't know how long the march would be. But we'd already seen what happened to men that fallen out. We'd already seen what happened to people that couldn't keep up. We'd see them get dragged screaming into the jungle, and we could hear them being stabbed to death. And he said that his friend kept begging him, "Don't let me go. Don't let me go." But he says, I couldn't hold him. I couldn't hold on to him, and I knew that I couldn't finish this march with him. And he was crying when he was telling us this, guys. There were tears falling down he was sobbing. And he was saying, I let him slip through my arms, and I knew what that meant. He says, I knew he was going to die. And I had to walk away from him while he was begging. He was begging me from behind. You could hear the voice kind of disappearing behind him as he was begging him to come back. And he spent the rest of the war in a Japanese prison camp after that. The last sounds he heard from his friend were him screaming on the side of the road. And I'll never forget that story. So, and there's other things that the Japanese did. There was this unit called 731 where they did live experimentation with disease on Allied prisoners of war, including Americans, on Chinese. I don't want to spend I've already spent too much time on this, but the reality is we're dealing with people that it's not too hard for people to build an argument that we're dealing with evil here. If there is an evil, this is it. If there is an evil on the planet, you're looking at it. Now, that's a point of debate, and this probably will be one of your questions tomorrow. Was this a good war? Was this a crusade against evil? If you look at this evidence with the Germans and the Japanese, and their actions, you could argue that. It's not difficult. I don't think it's difficult. But there are people that do. There are people that said, that there was American war crimes, and you could build an argument for some of that too. Different, American bombers look, we dropped the atomic bomb. That's not targeting a military target alone. You're going to kill civilians. Americans are firebombing Japanese cities. Creating fires so hot that people are jumping into rivers to avoid the flames, and the rivers are boiling. We're killing 100,000 plus people in some of these raids. I don't think you firebomb a city thinking you're not going to kill civilians. Is that different? Some people argue yes. Some people say no. So there is some question about, and this is what I was alluding to earlier in the lecture. This is some of what you're looking at with when we talk about, our civilians' legitimate targets. We'll say no, we're not supposed to, but our hands aren't clean on this. Anyways, I'll let you guys debate that. We'll give you, I'll put up a question tomorrow and I'll see your arguments. Was this, but it is framed. You guys should be aware that the College Board wants to frame this as good against evil. Okay, let's get into some kind of details here on this. Very early in the war, FDR gives a speech called the Four Freedom Speech, and he talks about this is what we're fighting for, freedom of speech and expression, freedom of every person to worship God in his own way, freedom from want. By the way, that's a Great Depression talking. What do you mean want? That means you should be able to eat, right? People should be able to put a roof over their family's head. You should be able to pursue prosperity is what I have here in the notes. That's a Great Depression talking, right? If you're well-fed, you don't talk about, man, everybody should be able to eat. It's just assumed everybody's going to have enough to eat. That's Great Depression talking there. And then freedom from fear. You used to have the right to not have Nazi tanks come storming through your town. That's what America's fighting for, he says. And there's my favorite artist is a guy by the name of Norman Rockwell. Let me zoom in and show you these pictures here. This is Norman Rockwell. I think this picture is called Young Lady with a Shiner. He painted that. I love that painting. He's one of my favorite American artists. To be quite honest, I don't know a bunch of artists, so I don't even know why I say American artists. He's one of my favorite artists because I don't know a whole bunch. Okay. And he also took it upon himself to assist in the war. He's not going to go out there and fight Nazis or anything, but he can pick up a paintbrush, or I don't know what medium this is, chalk or whatever. I have no clue what he used to paint this um, or produce this picture, but he figured he can contribute to the war effort through art. And so he drew FDR's Four Freedom speech. So this is one of them. I'm curious if you can identify which freedom this is. I think he did a fantastic job. There's another. And another. And another. That reminds me when my son was little, and you put your kids to bed and you just want to make sure they're okay, just want to make sure that you wish you could shelter them from the world and protect them forever, but the world sometimes makes that difficult. Hey, look, what I'm grateful for? I'm grateful I'm not in the middle of World War II right now. I'm grateful you guys don't have bombs falling through the roof of your house. I'm grateful that, as bad as this is, it's not worse, because it could be. So, anyways, and by the way, I've always argued with you that the key to happiness isn't about wanting what you don't have. It's about being grateful for what you do. So, anyways, we call ourselves the Arsenal of Democracy. That's going to be one of our earlier pledges too, the Arsenal of Democracy. And what that means is we will look. One of the things America is really good at is producing weapons, and just not even just weapons, trucks and planes and food and bullets and boots and everything. We produce everything and lots of it. And we say we will be the factory that defends the world from aggression, that fans a flame of democracy and freedom. We will be the arsenal of democracy. Well, there's some questions about that, because you're also defending Stalin, who was one of the bloodiest butchers to ever walk the planet. Okay, and I'll tell you this: if it wasn't for American help, I don't know if the Soviet Union would have made it. Now we flood that country with food to whatever extent we can, because it's difficult to get it over there. But there's a lot of Soviets that would have died if it wasn't for American food getting there, if there wasn't for American trucks going there, if it wasn't for American, waterproof telephone wire, radio wire, not radio wire. Sorry, that's radios don't need wires. Telephone wire, I think it was, signaling wire. What, I don't know, but there was like waterproof. I think it was telegraph wire. I don't know, but I remember reading about it. That Soviets weren't able to produce lots of that. We produced avalanches of this stuff for them. I don't know if they would have made it if it wasn't for American help. So, anyways, let's move on. Let's move on to the next. So again, this is a war. I guess to wrap it up with a bow. The question is, this is a good war? Question mark. Right? Question mark. That'll be. We'll have a debate on that. Okay, military service provided opportunities for women and minorities. We talked about this before. The big thing that College Board wants you to remember here is socioeconomic opportunities for women and minorities. Socioeconomic opportunities for women and minorities. Guys, World War II, there are lots of factory jobs. Women, black women, black men, and teenagers too. We don't talk much about them, but teenagers worked in these factories too. That is going to be huge for them. Okay, so we've covered that before. I don't want to spend any more time on that. Now we got to talk about. Did I get to the? Oh yeah. So now we get to the how we're able to pull off this victory. So what we're gonna talk about here is wartime cooperation. We'll first talk about the three conferences. So there's 3 conferences of the big 3. Okay. And what you're looking at here is the bloody butcher Stalin. That's FDR, who had polio, but you wouldn't know it by looking at this. His legs are paralyzed. And Churchill, Winston Churchill. So those are the big 3, the leaders of the big 3 countries. Soviet Union, the United States, Britain. They met 3 times during the war. And there's certain agreements they make that allow us to cooperate in the war. The first is the Tehran Conference, 1943. What's the agreement there? The United States and Britain agreed to invade Western Europe. Guys, Joseph Stalin is absolutely screaming for this. You must invade, you must invade, you must invade. Why? Because something like, I don't remember the exact percentage, something like 80% of the Nazi army is in the Soviet Union, and they are hanging on by their fingernails. The Soviet army is on the verge of collapse. They are in the fight of their lives. You have, millions of Soviets dying. They need somebody to relieve the pressure on the Eastern Front. They want a Western Front. And I don't just mean a battle of, Britain. I mean, they want soldiers on the ground in Western Europe to bring some of those soldiers from the East, some of those German soldiers from the East to the West. And we agree to do that. We don't do it as fast as Stalin would like. Stalin would later argue that you did that because you were hoping we would collapse. You were hoping that more Soviets would die. The reality, well, I don't know. It depends on who you want to believe. But America will argue planning a naval invasion of Western Europe with, hundreds of thousands of troops is a difficult and complicated thing. You don't just rush it and get it wrong, and then it takes you 2 more years to try again. You've got to get it right. But we do commit to a second front in Europe, and that will be the D-Day landings. I prefer the Normandy landings. I don't want to go into explanation of why the Normandy landings. So we will land in Normandy. We will open up a second front. We agree to do that at the Tehran Conference. It does not happen until 1944. By the way, the USSR agrees to enter the war against Japan. Okay, I think it's within 3 months after the surrender of Germany, they promise they will invade Japan. They will join the war. At the time, we thought we needed them to. This will be a problem later. Okay, we will regret making this deal with the Japanese. We'll talk about that when we get to the Korean War. Okay, now the Yalta Conference in 1945. Look, we make the decision. The war is not ended yet, by the way. That we want the unconditional surrender of Germany. What does that mean? That means they surrender. They don't get to say what happens to them. Okay, you have conditional surrender where you say we will surrender, but we want this and this and this. That's not going to happen here, guys. You will surrender, and we will tell you what happens to it. There will be no conditions. This is what we demand of the Germans. Okay. And then you get agreements on post-war Europe. What we want here is we start talking about, look, everybody knows we're going to win the war by this point. Okay, Germany, most Germans know it too. So we're starting to talk about what we're going to do. What's Germany going to look like after the war? What happens when we win? What are we going to do here? It's going to be divided. It's going to be decided that Germany will be divided into 4 occupation zones. And I will talk to you more about that later. We will share the division of Germany with the Soviet Union. We'll talk more about that later, especially when we get to the Berlin crisis. Okay, and then there's one more agreement, which is a Potsdam Conference. Now, by the time of the Potsdam Conference, I don't remember if Germany has surrendered by this time, but Japan has not, and we set up the same agreement with Japan that we will demand unconditional surrender. It's not going to quite work out that way, but that's the agreement at Potsdam. We will demand the unconditional surrender of Japan. It turns out that Japan will want to surrender, given one. Well, I don't know if they want to. That's complicated because the Japanese are not really big on surrender. But they would be willing to surrender if they would be allowed to keep their emperor, and we will allow them to do that. So it wasn't completely unconditional, but that was the agreement at Potsdam. There's going to be a lot of cooperation between the British and Americans in terms of technology. The biggest one is going to be the atomic bomb. That will be the Manhattan Project. It's going to end the war. Kind of zoom in here and show you what's going on here with the atomic bomb. British and American physicists get together on a research program to build a bomb that works on atomic fission. It's going to be splitting atoms, and splitting those atoms releases monumental amounts of energy, resulting in a catastrophic explosion like this. It was believed to be theoretical until it was actually done and accomplished with the help of Einstein and Oppenheimer, who fled Nazi Germany. The Germans came very close to beating us to the atomic bomb, by the way. Came very, very close to beating us to its deployment. But that's an example of cooperation on technology and science between, especially the British and the United States. The Soviets were left out of it, although they knew all about it through their spy network. But we're gonna cooperate on a ton of stuff. And I don't know how much they would want you to know about this on the AP test. I don't know if they want you to talk about radar or sonar or planes or aviation technology or cryptology, but the big one's probably the atomic bomb. If I was going to pick one thing you want to remember, it'd be the atomic bomb. And lastly, you should know the American strategy of island hopping because they mentioned it specifically. What's the American island of, strategy of island hopping? It's going to be this idea that we are going to jump from island to island to island to island to island and then invade Japan. The idea is that you let's say we invade Tarawa. I don't even know how you pronounce his name. I should Kwajalein. Yeah, I'm sure I butchered that. It's in the Marshall Islands. But you take one island, you turn it into a base. You set it up as a base of operation for the invasion of the next island, an invasion of the next island, an invasion of the next island. And eventually, we're going to island hop our way to Japan. The reason we don't attack all these islands is because, guys, getting the Japanese off these islands is ridiculously difficult. It is a monumental task. Taking one of these islands from the Japanese is going to result in the death of tens of thousands of soldiers, hellacious fighting. So this is why we're going to bypass the overwhelming majority of these islands and just island hop. And that's why this picture is taken. This is a picture of Iwo Jima. It becomes a symbol of the American ability to overcome any obstacle, to endure a hardship, to look. There were a lot of Americans that died trying to plant this flag on top of Iwo Jima, and it's become a symbol of American resolve, grit, determination. We can do it. We can do it. And if they could put that flag on top of Iwo Jima, you guys could stick it out in your house and make it. We'll make it together. Okay. That wraps up this lecture. That was a long one. I miss you guys. I will see you soon. Let me turn this off.